All right, today we are going to have another guest on, which are my favorite episodes so far because we get to chat with other people in the child free community. And this time, this is a longtime friend from a couple of years now, I believe. And we're going to chat about all things just living life on your own terms in your own way and whatever that looks like. And this is the expert to help you figure that out. Welcome to Unapologetically Child Free, the Everything That You Need in One Place podcast for a life without kids. I'm Maggie Dickens, a licensed therapist and your child-free hype woman, here with candid conversations about friendships, lifestyle, and everything that defines our child-free life. So join me on this journey where we get to live life unapologetically.
Yeah. So my name's Andrea Shipley, and gosh, where to start? Like you, I'm a therapist and have been doing all of my work remotely for a number of years. And when I set up my life and my business, I set it up so that I could travel full time without having to give up the work that matters so much to me. So my style of doing that has been to build out a school bus into an RV. So I've been living in this bus and traveling full time for about 4.5 years now, since the summer of 2019. And I've just kind of been doing laps around the country and spending a lot of time on public land, just visiting people that I care about and seeing new places and things and trying to have some fun while I'm here. I remember that when I was working full time at a treatment center or a couple different treatment centers, I just found that every weekend I wished I could, be out west. And I wasn't, having a weekend or a couple days off here and there just wasn't really enough to work with for what I wanted to do. And so I just got busy rethinking what I was doing and how I was going about it and just really put all my energy into creating something different for myself.
Which is just incredible. I don't know about you, but I remember being taught that there was this plan for life where almost by the time I was talking to someone else earlier today about in the United States, it's almost like you're supposed to figure out your life by the time you're 17. Know where you're gonna go to, especially when I was 17, you were supposed to go to college to know what kind of career you were going to have and have everything lined up to where you knew that you were gonna be able to retire by a certain age, and then you get to enjoy your life. And somewhere in there was having kids, buying a house, moving up the corporate ladder, those very, very, in my opinion, outdated traditional models of what adulthood looked like. And it sounds like you at some point recognized that path was not for you. Would you say that was 2019 or would you say that was beforehand?
That was beforehand. I mean, I think I went against that framework a long time ago, but I do know that I had notes in my notebooks about wanting to do this as early as 2015 and really even before then, because I actually remember seeing the first Skoolie that I ever saw when I lived out in California when I was in graduate school. So that must have been like 12 or something like that. And it just really inspired me. And I thought it just seemed super fun. And I started looking at my first bus to buy when I was in North Carolina after grad school. So it was a dream for a long time before I finally leapt and decided to do it.
And I want to talk about COVID. Everybody was like
Mm.
in their like little places and had to stick and stay. And I'm wondering kind of what that was like.
So like during COVID, I was spending a lot of time out on public land.
So
And
what's the draw to public land? Because I know, because you've told me, but for those who have no idea and they're like, "Isn't all land public? Like, what's happening?" Give us a
Mhm.
little bit of an explanation.
We probably never heard about public land because, you were in Texas for so long and there's a little bit in Texas, but really there's not much on the east side of the country. So
Mm.
it's sort of that's why most people doing this head out west because there's just a lot more public land available. This would be like Bureau of Land Management land or Army Corps of Engineers land. Sometimes you can camp on Forest Service land. not national park land, but basically there are big chunks of land in the United States that are considered public land. All citizens technically own the land. And there are regulations, so you can usually stay in a place for up to about 2 weeks, and then you have to move on, and different areas have different rules about how far away you have to go in between stays. At first, I was house sitting in California, and then that kind of fell apart, and I was all nervous
Mhm.
about COVID and what it meant, and I hadn't even started living on public land yet, so
Mm.
I was nervous about it. I didn't really know what to
Mhm.
expect.
Mm.
And so I was just like hyping myself up and was worried that they were going to close it all down or something like that because they were closing down a lot of campgrounds. And thankfully, that wasn't really the case. And so the majority of the beginning of COVID, I was just like hanging out by myself in the forests in Oregon, the desert in Southern California. It was just really surreal times, like
Sure.
I was really grateful to be able to have space and to be able to get
Mhm.
outside. It would have been terrible for me if I'd been in a city because
Mhm.
I need to be able to get outside and walk around and have space. It's just who I am. But yeah, like really, really surreal. I don't know how to explain what it was like, but for me, it was just like maybe I could see a few other RVs in the distance and I'm just kind of Mad Max style walking the desert with my dog, hanging out. But other than that, just going to the grocery store, going to the laundromat and doing what I need to do in between. But it was kind of a peaceful time to just really be I got to really dive into the part of me that's a hermit, and just really let that happen, which
Yeah.
was kind of great for me in a lot of ways, but also challenging at times too. And we just for me, I didn't know how to act around people for that period of time. So yeah, if I could go back and do it again, I might be a little less weird with some people, I have to admit.
I leaned into it, man. Like, I was in the suburbs at the time in a previous relationship where we were in a neighborhood, but we were in big houses and we had a pretty decent sized lot. And so our bubble felt big enough, but there were people who were definitely like hanging out in garages and being like, we're social distancing, but you're really just in a garage. So for me, I just was like, nope, I don't feel comfortable because I just am so introverted. And I was like, nope, here's
Mhm.
my
Yeah.
excuse to not be like hanging out all the time and being able to just do it that way, which was great because I did have one group of friends who I think 5 people got COVID at one event, and I was like, "Mhm, this is why I didn't go."
Yeah.
So it gave me another, like, 3 months of being able to stay hermited myself because it takes a lot of energy to people, you know? Shifting gears a little bit since we are on the unapologetically child-free, podcast. Tell us a little bit about your child-free story, living the life that you have in a school bus without kids.
Yeah. Well, when I was in my teens and 20s, I always assumed I would have kids. Maybe that's probably a pretty common story, like I just didn't even question it, but I
Mhm.
also didn't think a lot about it as an adult woman dating and things like that. I always knew that I wasn't ready. I never had any desire to be a single mother or anything like that. So it's intentional in terms of taking the necessary precautions to not get pregnant. Right? I think that probably it worked out differently with me in terms of relationships. Might have had children along the way, and
Mhm.
I still am kind of open to it, but I'm also 40 now, so I know that, I know what that means in terms of the likelihood of having kids at some point. And I'm glad to not be too concerned whether it happens or not. And when I was young, I remember always thinking if I do have kids, I wouldn't want to just be the mother who just buys the house and settles down
Yeah.
and does the typical mom thing anyway. I always kind
Mhm.
of imagined, still traveling and seeing the world and just bringing the child along, which is still what I think I would do if it ever came up. But yeah, there are also a lot of those times when I look at my life and I'm like, where would I put where would I put kids? How would I do that? And I know that there are a lot of people living my kind of lifestyle who have, you know, sometimes up to like 6 kids in a schoolie situation, which is sort of fascinating. And then I've also seen, people on YouTube who are like sailing the world with their kids. So I know that it's doable, but it's just sort of, I guess you just gotta couple up with somebody who's of the same mentality. And, so far that's been a little challenging for me to find. Just most people that as I'm out on the dating scene, most people are pretty stationary already and
Yeah.
settled into their grooves of life. And so that's not what I'm up to.
Oh, man, and that's a totally different conversation. But
Hmm.
one of the things that you just brought up, and I cannot believe we've made it this far into our conversation without mentioning what you do for a living in addition to being a therapist, is helping people be very purposeful. And if I don't describe this accurately, please jump in and correct me. From what I understand that you do and that you do really well, because I've seen you talk about it and seen you in coaching situations and things like that, is helping people better understand not only the decisions that they're making, but how to come to a decision and how to do so
Mm,
purposefully and intentionally, with the end goal being, I have this life that is architecturally designed, if you will, in terms of it is fully planned from, inside to outside versus this, I fell into it. I just happened to be born in this town, so this is the town that I'm gonna live in. And that to me is something that as a child-free person, and I mean, I'm an expat, I've lived in several places throughout my life. I think many, many child-free people are those that are looking to say, how can I make life mine? How can I make
mm.
sure that I'm living the life that I wanna live? And kids never really factored into it. Yes, there are people who can do it with kids, of course. I'm biased, and so I think it would be easier without them. So tell us a little bit about your lifestyle by design, what fill in the gaps for where I missed.
I remember that when I was in situations where I was working with other people, I remember, I would talk about my dreams and for what I wanted, and then maybe other people would talk about their dreams for what they wanted, and they would talk about their frustrations of what's not working. And I'm always so tempted to go into like, well, what have you tried? What are you working on? How can we work together to improve this and change this funky system? And I kept finding again and again that people were maybe more inclined to just kind of complain about it every day than actually do
Mhm,
something about it every day. So
mhm.
I sort of shifted out of trying to do the transformation for all of us and into like, okay, I'm just going to focus on me and my life and, help people along the way to the extent that I can, but just need to sort of focus on what I can actually influence and change. And so that's when I just started to really think more about what I really wanted, what my values really were. And I think that's the big piece is just figuring out how to not only identify what our real values are, but also make choices that align with those values. And it's amazing how many people are not doing that day to day. And I think we see that as therapists,
Mhm.
but not everybody needs therapy. Some people are really at an okay point and they're tired of just complaining about what isn't in their life and they're ready to get on board as creators and make what they want to happen. And,
Yeah.
while a plan is really, really important and a design is really, really important, also part of it is planning for the unplannable, because whatever we design and create, it's ultimately going to look a bit different. But my main focus is like, when we know those values and how we want to feel each day, then we can make little designs and little tweaks each day to get more of those feelings that we want on a
Yeah.
consistent basis, even while we're moving towards these goals and these external transformations. We've
Yeah.
got to sort of transform from the inside out too. Otherwise, we don't know how to enjoy the goals once they're achieved.
Yeah.
So who cares? Because we know that like traveling the world isn't going to solve your problems. Like
Right.
if you don't like your own company,
Right.
then you traveling the world isn't going to help that,
Mhm.
and so many of us who and I've experienced this myself, like, once we achieve those goals for me, like, I actually hit a depression after I finally figured out, like, okay, I'd worked a year on this bus and I'd finally gotten on the road and, you know, I'd reached all my goals and I didn't necessarily have more goals lined up, and I had to, like, stop and figure out how to be in the having of
Yeah.
something rather than in the wanting of something. And so I think that's actually a really important piece of
Yeah.
lifestyle design because our life is now always. And so it's all good to have a future vision and future goals. And I think it's essential because we are evolving and an advocate of consciously evolving, not just
Mhm.
doing,
Yeah,
kind of
love
being
that.
willy-nilly seeing what the environment
Yeah.
does to us, but
Yeah.
thinking really intentionally about how to become the kind of people that we want to see more of in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest pieces are, figuring out how to enjoy the journey,
Mhm.
being really intentional and holding our vision for what we want to create, and then, creating a plan. And part of that plan is also, preparing for obstacles,
Mhm.
preparing
Yeah.
for, and you've seen me like just flailing in the obstacle over the
Oh,
years,
man. We have shared those
um,
flailing moments for
we
sure. Yeah.
definitely flailed together. Yeah. Um, and so, right now I'm in a reevaluation period where,
Mhm.
like I created this vision for the coaching business. And right now I'm sort of reassessing like, d does this actually fit with this lifestyle that I've worked so hard to create for myself? What adjustments can I make?
Oh, man.
Um,
Yes.
so these aren't really easy things to sift through. And I know that for myself, it's been really important to have a community of people with, like similar things going on to just sort of sort through a lot of those pieces because, when we're on our own with it, it is just easy to get lost and stuck
Yeah.
and,
And think we're the
you
only
know,
ones.
make the same, yeah, feel alone in it. Yeah. Think,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that well, you've said so much, and I'm just like it's interesting because as listening to you talk through the lens of the child-free space versus you and I talking in the past of online entrepreneurship is my brain is just lighting up with how often there are so many groups of people, and I think that the child-free community falls into this a lot, of where we get to a point and then we stop. And especially when someone is child-free by choice, overt choice, and they're surrounded by people who are making more traditional choices in their life, and it feels, "Okay, I just have to be stuck, and I can't evolve, I can't move forward with this life of freedom and peace and slowness that I gave myself, simplicity that I gave myself, or perhaps time for adventure, or whatever the draw was for being child free, because there's no one around me doing it. And I don't have that model. I don't have that encouragement. I don't have someone saying, this is how you can be child free. This is how you can live a life that honors the person that you are and the person that you want to be, because the only images we have of a child-free person are what we see on TV, which is, not a parent yet, or the very rich auntie who comes in and is a hot mess, but everyone loves her because she just gives away a bunch of gifts and money, and or you have the, "I'm just so sad and lonely and depressed," and it's like, when you're none of those things, who am I? What am I? And it sounds like the work that you
An
do with
aspiring
people.
auntie.
Yes. Yes. Oh, my 20-year-old nephew would love it if I were the, like, just cash throwing auntie, but yeah, that's not
Yeah, sure.
it's not the life I lead. I mean, I will fly
Yeah,
I
we
will
are
fly
creating a
him out to
character.
Portugal. If he wants to come, I'll fly him out here, but, um, that's the extent of my abilities at the moment. But yeah, it sounds like what you do really is about saying, you don't have to fit into any box. You get to decide. Does your box look like a bus? Does it look like living in an apartment in another country? Does it look like having a house on some land with some goats and chickens? And, what does your box, if you will, what does your life look like? And it sounds like you help people get creative with that or allow their creativity to flourish.
Yeah. I mean, someone else is always going to try and put us in a box, but that doesn't mean that we have to, you know?
Yeah.
I think that people give up on that creativity or they feel like they might even have to fit a certain stereotype and like
Yeah.
live up to certain stereotypes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm much more interested in what happens when we let those go and just figure out who we are and what we want. And I think that another one that's been challenged in my own life is just stereotypes around being a woman. I'm constantly one of the first things people say to me is like, "You're out here alone? Where's your man?" Stuff like that. And I'm
Yeah.
just like,
Uh-huh.
beats the hell out of me where he is. I don't know.
Yeah, if you find him,
But
will you tell him my
yeah,
bus is
send him
over
my
here?
way. But, I just got tired of waiting for,
Mhm.
other people to be on board with what I wanted, and
Yeah.
eventually was just like, I'm just going to go ahead and do what I want to do and stop waiting around. And I feel like it's just created a strength in me that wouldn't be there otherwise. And I'm really grateful for it. And there can be femininity in that independence too. Something that you mentioned earlier was like the the obstacles and the way that we get stuck. And I think
Mhm.
that part of what like having the community and having other people who are modeling these out of the box things is like it
Mm.
kind of helps us to see that that place where we normally stop is not actually the ending point,
Yes.
that there is actually something on the other side of it, and that's
Mhm.
so tough, like, everything that's worth going after is gonna come with these failures along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
God, I struggle with this so much, like, again, you've seen it, but it's like, "Okay, I've hit this wall before, and I maybe pushed a little further, so I know I can do that again." But there
Mhm.
might be I think for a lot of people, it's like they want the dream, but it's not really worth the effort for them.
Well,
They don't actually want it enough
mm.
to invest in it in a just in a steady way. And so they go with the easier option, which is to go back to the status quo and just kind of complain and moan about it and just really hope that the retirement pays off, you know?
Oh, man, you are just
It's so hard to push through those moments of like, is there actually anything on the other side of this? Am I actually headed towards something or am I
yeah.
just like in a delusional, idealistic like state of mind where I'm like setting myself up for failure?
Yeah.
I think these are some of the things that just a lot of us, myself included, really stuck. Thankfully, I consider myself a practical dreamer, which, to me means that I have these sort of big ideas that are maybe kind
Mhm.
of weird to people, but I've also got whatever the Taurus in me that can actually like put the pieces together and make
Sure.
it happen. It,
Yeah.
usually it doesn't always work out, but thankfully I've also experienced that there have been some things that I wanted that I didn't get and like later I'm glad I didn't get them.
Oh,
So it's always
man.
that too.
For sure.
But yeah, it's really hard to find that energy to just kind of push through that next obstacle sometimes. But I think I mean, we know that that's what leads to success for people. So
And growth, and,
yeah.
it's interesting because and this is not what the episode is about, but this is what you have me thinking, is about relationships. So whether they're platonic or romantic, I'm specifically thinking romantic, but this can be the case in platonic relationships, is when we're in a relationship that isn't working, there's that kind of that place of this barrier of getting out of the relationship and going and doing what's best for me feels so insurmountable because it would simply be easier to stay in the relationship I've been in for a long time. We've got our household established, we've got our routine established. It's very traditional to have that one lifetime partner. And sometimes that's not the best thing. And honestly, I don't know how much of this is gonna end up in the show, but this is what's happening in my head, is like Taylor Swift just put out a song that's from the vault, and it was the date of the song was revealed by one of her producers to be written back in 2021. And so, all the Swifties, and we're all talking about, holy moly, she was in this crumbling relationship for years before she and that guy broke up. And it's one of those things of like, even one of the most powerful people in the world can get stuck in this is what I thought my life was going to look like. I thought I was going to marry this person. I thought I was going to be in a relationship with them forever, and it's crumbling, and I'm begging you to be a better person. To simply be a better person instead of realizing I am worthy of hurting and going through the uncomfortability of doing something new that's going to make my life even better. And if we look at Taylor Swift, she's the she's on top of the world right now. She is, in my opinion, the world right now. And and so not settling and being able to write an amazing album like Midnight's, I think it speaks to what you're talking about of it's hard. It's hard to walk away from something into the unknown when what we know isn't working.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of to me, it's like there's something felt sense in that, like that it's like a calling towards something. Like when you know deep in your gut what's possible, even though
Yes.
you don't have any proof or evidence of it. And
Mhm.
I mean, I just can't help it. That's what I live my life by, you know?
Yeah.
And it's terrifying, but it's so fun. It's so fun and rewarding,
It's
you
so
know?
fun and it's so rewarding, and it's kind of like what you were saying before about just I have these tangible goals, get the bus up and running, right? And the hundreds, maybe even thousands of little tasks to go from a shell of a bus to making it your home. And then you get to this point and it's like, okay, well, I'm done. And I used to be that way. And I began shifting my mindset to be more about the journey instead of
Yeah.
the
Having to show up for the
tasks.
tasks.
Yeah. Because if I thought about it from even just moving to Portugal, the tasks, man, the
So many.
tasks, the
So many. Yeah.
bureaucracy and like all of this. And I'm helping my partner move over now. And so, because I was like, hey, I've already done this. It's going to be easy peasy. It is not, but
Mhm.
it is easier.
Mhm.
And getting here was not the end. Getting here was not the end. Being in this apartment, it
Yeah, it's the
was
beginning.
It was the beginning, and it was such a freaking hard transition, and it was something that really tested me. It still tests me to this day of just like, because everywhere we go, there we are, right? I'm still an
Mhm.
introvert. I'm still someone who would prefer the company of my dogs, and I like a routine, and I like things to be easy. So I go walking on the flat part. There's only one flat part in Lisbon, and I found it, and I walk it every day.
Yeah.
It's easier. I have kind of a similar thing, and it works because I'm still working on the emotional growth part. I'm working on the life I want to lead is not the stuff I want to do, it's the values I wanna live by, and I think that's what you were speaking to a little while ago.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it's like, I think about it like I've committed to loving my life every day, regardless of what's happening in that day. And that that means a lot of things. That doesn't mean just feeling like, oh, this day is so wonderful,
Yeah.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
not necessarily the feeling of love, but it's actions of love, like showing up like this day matters and this is good enough. And doesn't mean I'm not going to strive towards something more awesome tomorrow. But, like for me too, as not only as an introvert, but also as somebody who just has a lot of cycles, where like I have days where I have tons of energy and I want to go and, climb up a mountain. And then I have other days, more days, frankly, where I'm like pretty low energy and I want to just kind of chill and like have some tea and, take a walk
Yeah.
and that's gonna be perfectly enough,
Yeah.
hopefully. But, I also have days where maybe I'm sad or lonely or whatever.
Mhm.
So how do I show up with love on those days, And I think
Yeah.
that that's just totally a worthwhile commitment to myself and to my life because, it means that I'm not constantly scraping for a future that I hope will save me from myself, because that's not the kind of goal setting and planning that I want to help people do. Like, if you
Yeah.
think you can't be okay until you get this, this, and this, then like you're probably not the right person to work with me because I'm gonna I'm gonna demand that you commit to loving it now. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, let's work on getting you there, but
I
don't wait for it. Don't wait for it.
I I totally agree, and I've been one of these people who I look at the mindset of enjoy your life when you get to enjoy your life when, and the flat part that I walk on here in Lisbon is on the water, and there's cruise docks. So cruise ships come through Lisbon. It's a very popular port, and I see a lot of gray-haired people. That's not saying much. I have gray hair underneath all this hair dye, and but very much my parents' age or older, and whether they're struggling to move about or they appear to be very able-bodied, in my mind, I make up this story in my head, whether it's true or not, I don't know, I don't talk to these people, is that they're they're living their retirement because they didn't live their life. Again, that may or may not be true. These people could be cruisers every year for the last
Sure.
50 years. But I have it in my head of, I'm so grateful I get to live in this place that people are paying thousands of dollars to come and visit. I get to walk my dogs to a place called Praça de Comercio, so Praça de Comercio, and it is one of the most highly photographed places for Lisbon, and I walk my dogs there. I just go and, like,
Mhm.
go there. And for you, you put out these beautiful photos of being in Baja and being in northern parts of the United States, and people spend time away from work and they make it an event to go live life. I think that's what I'm getting to is they make
Mhm.
living life an event instead of
2 weeks a year if they're lucky.
yeah. I'm just all about the days where you just get to sit around and drink tea. The days where you get to say like, "Yeah, I don't feel like I'm wasting my time in this beautiful environment." Right? I'm here living my life on this public land. I don't have to like, "Oh my gosh, I've got to savor it all in, 2 days because
Mhm.
I've got to go back to work, at the end of the
Right.
weekend." So,
Yeah.
I think there's something to that
There
as
is some
well.
of that. I'll be honest. There is a little of that because I am still working. And then there is also travel time in between. So there's a little bit of crunching that I have to do. But I've also, I kind of have to remind myself like I don't have to see it all ever, but certainly I don't have to see it all today or this week, I can and every time that I just keep learning about new cool places and new cool things that there are to see too. So I'm gonna have to go back to some old spots that I've been in, but yeah, I mean, I'm glad to not feel like I have to squeeze an entire lifetime into a week or two of each year, What a lot of pressure that is.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's something about I don't know if I'm a bit of a I must be more of a rebel than I ever really thought. Like, I've always kind of pictured myself as, like, a bit of a rule follower, but yet
Mhm.
I live in all of these gray spaces all the time.
I I call myself a risk averse rebel. I think of myself as like pushing against the barriers that other people put me in, those boxes that other people put me into, but I don't think I live outside of a box. I am not like just free floating like the feather at the end of Forrest Gump. Like that is not my life. I have,
No. Yeah.
I have a bench that I'm sitting
Structures of
on and a
life
box of
forward.
chocolates that I'm eating. Like that's more my life,
Good
but
for you.
it's it's a it's still a box, right? It's just the one that I created for myself. And I think that that might be what you're
Right.
speaking to of like I'm a
Yeah.
rebel, but I'm also following some rules, and I'm wondering, are they rules that you've set up for yourself versus others, or would you say it's a little bit of both?
Well, it's definitely both. I think what I was thinking about when I started talking about that was previous work experiences. And I'm thinking about like the golden handcuffs of certain positions in life. And, when my last full-time job, I was so close to getting to the point where I would have paid time off. And right before that, I decided to go part-time. And I was like, "Take the health insurance, take the
Mhm,
benefits,
mhm,
just pay me hourly, and I'm gonna make my own rules." So,
mhm.
like, there's, like, a stubborn, rebellious part of me that knows about the risk of feeling owned and is like,
Yes.
"F all of that." Like, as much as I would love to get paid time off, because that
Yeah,
sounds great,
that sounds amazing.
and as
Yeah,
much as
yeah.
I would love to have someone else pay for my health insurance, F it, because that just felt like ownership to me,
Oh,
and
man,
I just wasn't interested.
that statement that you just made of, like, feeling owned, and I know that some people who have chosen to be child-free may relate to this. There may be people who don't, but that's how I view parenthood is my life is somebody else's. My life now belongs to someone else. And as much as I would like to believe that motherhood is evolving to where moms are finding more of themselves, and I see it here in Europe a lot more that moms have their own lives versus moms in the United States. However, it's still on some level my life, my time is beholden to someone else because that's my job. And I could not sign up for that. Before you and I got on this call, I took a 45-minute nap because I wanted to, because I had a very hectic morning. And I was able to, both because I own my own business and I can schedule things around my life, but I also don't have somebody else's schedule to attend to. I
Yeah,
don't have somebody else's needs to worry
just the
about, which is
dogs.
yeah, who cuddled up with me and they were like, "Yeah,
Nice. Yeah.
this is
I've
what
heard
we
a
do."
lot of moms say that they don't feel like their body is their own for a lot of years, and that's strikes me like in one way it's beautiful. Thank God for mothers. I'm so
Sure.
grateful for my
Yeah.
mother. I'm so
Yeah.
great. Like I love all of my friends who are mothers. It's a beautiful thing to see. And
Mhm.
there's a part of me that's always been like literally always been a mother. Like that responsible part of me that you know, old soul. Like I feel like even the codependent part from when I was in a long-term relationship, like there's a
Yeah.
mothering that happens with the people that I love. And maybe that's part of why I always assumed I would be a mother. But then I don't know how to, I've never talked about this, so I don't know how it's going to come out. But I'm just thinking about being a woman and the long history of ownership of women
Right.
and then the sexual traumas that so many
Yes.
women face. Like there's a
Yes.
certain reclaiming, like I'm still trying to figure out how to let my body be my own.
Yeah.
That the idea of having it not be my own for so long is kind of scary. Like maybe I'm not ready for that. Maybe I would be. I'd step up for whatever needs to
Sure, of
happen. But
course.
there's something really beautiful about just taking the time to figure out how to and I have a long way to go, but to like figure out how to let my body be my own and to really claim it as my own and to feel like I don't owe anybody anything. Like I don't, because I feel like there can be like a certain entitlement over women's bodies.
Oh, for sure. For
It
sure.
can, and it's just always really pissed me off a lot. And
Yeah.
so, and
Yeah.
to the point where I even reject my own femininity a little bit, and I need to resolve some of that.
Mhm.
But yeah, like how to reclaim that is
Yeah.
an interesting kind of question, and I'm sure that you'll probably have people on your podcast in the future
Hopefully.
who work on that specifically.
Some experts along the way. It's interesting because there's 2 things that you said that I've spoken about previously. One is the mothering that you were talking about. I've been the same way, and I think about it less as mothering and more of compassionate, caring, kind, giving, and how we as a society have attributed those characteristics to only mothers. And we see this because if I were to ever be a parent, I'd wanna be a dad. Like, because, that's the easier role for sure. I don't wanna be a parent, but if someone, like, alien abducted me to make it happen, that's the choice I would make. But we see it in this way of like, oh, when a little girl is being very sweet with a doll, we say, "Oh, she's being such a good mom to the baby," instead of being a good big sister or being a good friend or being a good babysitter or something like
Person.
that, right? Just a good person taking care of someone else. We are putting that label of this is a mom behavior. We
Sure.
see that even when men and we're talking heteronormative stereotypes here. When men step up and they do something like, quote unquote, babysit their own children,
I was just thinking
right?
that. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, "Oh my gosh, what a great dad. He's spending the day with his kids," and it's like, that's his MFing job. Like, that's what he's supposed to do, but we see those behaviors as mothers and not as fathers or not as other people. So, that's one thing that I've spoken to of, yeah, we get caught up into this is just the natural transition. This is what we do is have character traits which equate to I'm gonna be a good mom. Versus being I'm choosing to use these characteristics in my role as a parent to tiny humans. And then the second thing that you said that was interesting is I tweaked my neck the other day and it's healing, thank goodness. Took a while. But I was talking about the idea that if I had a little human, tiny human who wanted to like pull on me, like hug on me, be sweet, how painful that would have been. And I just think about how much I did that to my mom. I was, like, on my mom all the time, just, like, glued to her, and she's not really a cuddly person, so I don't know how I survived. But that's what it was, right? You are so right that mothers' bodies do end up belonging to other people, whether it's the tiny humans or people shaming them for their bodies changing and all of those things, and we need mothers, and I'm
Yeah.
just not gonna be one of them.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that part of that, it's making me think about the ways that we kind of maybe feel like we don't deserve to design our lives differently, or setting boundaries is really hard for people. But like, what does it take to get out of that stuckness of like, one thing that I hear a lot is this fear that people will be just fall into like a selfish stupor
Mm.
if they claim something for themselves or design something for themselves. And I think that certainly that happens with parents. They I can't do this or this because
Mhm.
of the kids. But even for single and child-free people, I think that we have sort of we might have similar narratives about these limiting ideas about who I have to be or who I have to show up for,
Oh,
and
yeah.
step out into something different is just we get hung up all over the place.
Yeah, that word selfish, that's something that as a child-free person, specifically a child-free by choice and who has, like, a whole platform, and that's what I talk about, is people say, "What a selfish thing to do. How selfish of you to not have kids." And I think that one of the things that my pushback is, I don't believe it's selfish, for one, because there are so many
Who are we
reasons.
having kids for?
Right. I mean, there's that one. You ask a parent, "Why did they have kids?" And they say, "I want," or "I wanted." So
Uh,
there's that argument. But
right.
the other piece of it is I refuse to live my life for anyone else. Whether or not I had chosen to have kids, I still would have hoped that I would have lived my life for me. I don't know if that would have been possible in the way that we raise kids these days, but I do know that,
It's possible.
yeah, I mean, I don't wanna live my life for anyone else. I love your story of saying, "I don't wanna be an employee, I wanna be a contractor, or I wanna own my own business. I want to decide where I'm gonna park my bus, and I'm gonna make these decisions," because depending on what you believe, some people would say this is the only life that you have, some people would say this is the only life that you have at this moment, and why am I living it for somebody else? Why am I letting somebody else dictate to me, "This is how you do it?" That just doesn't, it
Mhm.
boggles my mind. I mean, I'm traditional. I was born and raised in the southeastern part of the United States. There are pieces of my being that are hard to break from those heteronormative,
Sure.
traditional models, and I'm doing my best to break through them because I think they're outdated. I think that they're a
Yeah.
joke.
And what are the here? Every rule is made to be broken, I guess, in a way, like there might be something valuable about living those traditions and then breaking free. And then if you go back to it, it's your choice rather
Yeah,
than just something you never questioned. And I think that there can be freedom in that too. Like
yeah,
I don't imagine myself living and traveling in a bus for the rest of my life,
yeah,
like but my thought is kind of more like, let me do the world exploration now while I have legs to stand on. And then maybe I'll want to do the chickens later and chill out while
yeah,
all the other gray haired people are wandering around?
yeah,
Um, so I have to kind of even remind myself of that sometimes. Like it is okay if you decide to do something that seems like in the box or traditional, but it's gonna be my choice rather than some default mode
yes.
situation, hopefully.
Oh, I think that's one of the best ways that we can kind of wrap this up is whatever your choice, as long as it's intentional and not a default, not I never gave it much thought. That's one of the things that I
Right.
hear a lot in the child-free community of people who hit 30 and they don't have kids yet, and then it's the, like, "I never really thought about it. I assumed it would happen," similar to what your story is, and I'm seeing more and more people go, "I just didn't know." I get people in my DMs on Instagram who go, "How did you know that you didn't wanna have kids?" And it's such an interesting thing to hear people go, "I have a choice. I never knew I did." And
Mm.
so I love what you do. I think that what you do is, I mean, clearly I'm biased because I feel like I've done similar things in my life to be purposeful and intentional, and I think more people should. I think we should just live the
Mhm.
heck out of life and stop living for others, but again, I'm
Yeah, or
biased.
out of fear-based decisions. I think that's a
Yeah,
big part of it, like,
yeah.
we don't to even get to the point where you can see past the fear is
Mhm.
so important. Because otherwise we think we want what everyone tells us we want, you know, but I think we have to really lean into that fear in order to find out what's more true, and most people aren't really willing or interested in doing that. So,
Yeah.
send me the brave ones, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that the child-free community is full of very brave people because it's not the most wild decision that people make in their lives, but it's one that creates a lot of pushback and it makes it a lot, makes it quite difficult in some ways. So, yeah, I am so happy that you were willing to come and chat with me and take some time away from what you're doing and where you are and all of that kind of stuff. So, thank you so much. This has been so
It
fun.
was fun.
Yeah, of
Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure to talk
course.
to you.
Yeah. And for everyone listening, I will have all the links and ways to work with Andrea and learn more about her stuff in the show notes. If you don't know how to access show notes, that's cool. I didn't know what they were until I started a podcast. So you can reach out to me directly and I will give you all of that information. And until next time, have a wonderful week.